behind that. And through any entrepreneur journey, I'm sure you've dealt with this with your coach as well. There's the journey and the struggle to find what you want to do, but then there's the journey itself that is a constant struggle. So how did you land on the business that you were going to create? I'm sure there was options that are plenty.
Good question. I think once again, like just super non-linear. I started out thinking about food waste and plant-based diets are the top two solutions for, when you look at Project Drawdown, for example, and you rank the solutions by what's going to keep our planet under 2 degrees by the end of the century. I knew that food waste and plant-based diets were the top two solutions there. It's still, I think if we push that threshold down and say 1.5 degrees, that's the threshold, not 2 degrees. Food still shows up in the top 5.
Wow.
For me, this started out as a food waste journey. It started out as a food waste journey out of like personal needs several years ago, because I knew that stuff that we were buying for the house in the grocery store, we were wasting a ton of that food. We would get a bag of 20 carrots, but when you're a household of 2 and 2.15 people, there's not that many carrots that are going to get eaten in the week. And so I think for me, it's seeing some of those reflected in life. And as I started to explore the idea of food waste, I started to come up against some limitations in what I could execute versus what's a black box in the space of food waste. And then I did the Climate Farm School course, which was a way for me to understand where our food comes from and sources of waste, kind of. And I approached it as I just want to learn about our food system. I've been raised in cities most of my life. Even my adult life, despite being in Arkansas and Indiana, which tend to be more industrial, agricultural states, I wasn't actively involved in my food system. Sure, I went to the farmer's market, but that was the extent of my involvement in our food system and bought stuff. Yeah. So I wanted to learn how food was being grown, what kind of decisions were being made around it. And as an anthropologist at heart, I really started to feel an internal personal discomfort around the good, bad binary that we were starting to hear around food, right? Like animals bad, milk bad, almonds great, but almonds also bad.
Right.
Avocado is great, but avocado is also bad. And it's just so overwhelming to think about all of that. So I think for me, what started out as food waste, the more I learned about the food system, the more I started to see some of these places where I could, problems that I was solving for myself, I could also help my community understand and learn to solve. And I was starting to see some of these gap areas, right? Like the more I learn about regenerative ag, the more I know that there are farmers here in North America that are really going back to is a bit of an overstatement, but that are finding ways to regenerate their soil, that are not pro monocropping, that want to encourage biodiverse crops on their land, that want to incorporate animals into their ecosystem. And there are people who, like me, who wanted to, or who want to eat better, who want to take climate action in their everyday life, even if they don't want to change their entire career to be bent towards climate action, which is a totally legitimate choice. But what was missing for me was not everyone can take 3 months off to go learn about food systems. Like, that's not a thing for most people. It's not accessible for most people. It wouldn't have been accessible in my life a decade ago. So all of these started to coalesce to say, great, let's maybe start with community and product for people who want to use food as a way to take climate action. For me, I mean, you said it while introducing me. Food is, to me, the easiest way to take climate action. You may not be able to go out and buy a new car. You may not be able to redo your house because the investment's pretty heavy. But we can all make choices about the food we are buying, or most of us can make choices about the food we are buying and consuming that has a climate impact and that supports the farmers who are making, and the farmers and ranchers who are making the effort to be more climate friendly, be more regenerative in the way that they tend to the soil. It started out as just food events, where people, I think the other piece for me is so many of us are thinking about the same thing. Like just in this conversation, I definitely want to have a follow-up conversation with you, Michael, on, tell me more about this bar. Where do you have, how are you thinking about compostability? Because these are all questions that we all share. And we can all exchange information and speak to each other about our challenges and find resources to share with each other.
The ecosystem, I think that's part of the reason why I also wanted to get on board. Like any sort of ecosystem online, like a chat group or whatever that was about climate action or even veganism and things like that, which I wouldn't consider myself one. It was all such helpful, warm embracing of, you're in the community now and everyone, like it really was a helpful place. And in where you and I met was in the MCJ, my climate journey, which is actually an anagram of my initials. So I felt kismet to join. Nice. And everyone, it was super, super helpful. Like the girl that moderates Slack, she recommended some wonderful people, and everyone's happy to chat because I think we know that a lot of people, unfortunately, don't have time in their day to consider climate action. They're just busy, like as you said, raising your kids and living your lives and going to work and dealing with the, your own mental health through the pandemic and through life, which is what it is. And it's hard if you're not just brought up in a way that you're exposed to all of these new sort of ideas. It's hard to even understand what we're up against as far as climate change and the food systems therein. And you have other groups that are popping up, unfortunately, that are like, you should eat all the meat. Now you should eat all the testicles and the organs, and like this is the way to be superhuman. And so it's like it seems to be always breeding something else that's the antithesis of progress, unfortunately. And I don't think that we should never eat an animal ever again. Like there is something in the history of humanity that has eaten animals, but I do think, and feel free to disagree with me, but I do feel that we're at a point that we are so privileged, and at least in the West, that we can create food systems as you are, that we don't need to depend on animal agriculture, that we don't need to have all of this cruelty in the way that they're produced and hormones and all these things, which I'm